Hello everyone, welcome or welcome back. If you don't know who I am Noelle D, and I just made this new channel and have not talked about one of my favorite books of all time at this point, and that is none other than The Lies of Locke, Lamora. And if you don't listen to anything else I say and you just read this book, I think I'd be fine with that. But please stay and listen to everything else, But I kind of wanted to use this as this video as an excuse to talk about one of my favorite books and re-recommend it in a way, because my other channel is now my manga channel and this channel is my novel channel. So I'm going to read the back and then I'm going to talk about all the things that I really love about this book and why I think people should read it and what type of person should read it or what type of reader should read it. An orphan's life is harsh and often short in the mysterious island city of Comore. But young Locke Lamora dodges death and slavery, becoming a thief under the tutelage of a gifted con artist. As leader of the band of light-fingered brothers known as the Gentleman Bastards, Locke is soon infamous, fooling even the underworld. But in the shadows lurks someone still more ambitious and deadly, faced with a bloody coup that threatens to destroy everyone and everything that holds meaning in his mercenary life. Locke vows to beat the enemy at his own brutal game or die trying. So, how do I even begin? Let's start with the world building of this book. I really enjoy the setting that this book is in. It is, a lot of people say, a medieval Venice. I wouldn't quite call it medieval. I don't know why. Sometimes I think of the industrialized sort of setting of that sort of drabby color, but then there are also very beautiful colors within the world. But think of Venice, but think of a more beat down Venice, and there are buildings that some people have that open up and the bottom of it has got monsters in it, and there are people who fight monsters and really big sea monster creatures within this book, and the fantastical elements within the world building is not very strong. So this isn't the strongest fantasy book, the most fantastical, the most high fantasy book that I would recommend, but the stakes are high, and yeah, it's not quite an epic, and I feel like that is mainly where I lean to. And although this is a series, you could read it as a standalone and not bother with the other books. I do have the other one right behind me, and this is not a finished series, by the way. There's this book, and then Red Seas Under Red Skies, and then The Thorn of Emberlin, I think. And then there is supposed to be a fourth book that hasn't come out yet because Scott Lynch has opened up about struggling with depression, among other things, and that has caused problems within his writing. And I'm sure that people saying that his first book is their favorite book may cause some issues for him, but I think he has been writing some novellas recently, so that's something to look forward to, at least for me. So I started reading Red Seas Under Red Skies and wasn't feeling it. But anyways, back to The Lies of Locke Lamora. I read this last year and it's very different than regular fantasy. So this isn't necessarily under the world building, but I'm just going to go with under fantastical type stories, just kind of like plotting and everything, is that you're following a thief as your main character, and then you're following a band of thieves a little bit down the line, which becomes a found family for a main character, and you love them and you realize that the decisions that they make are because of the terrible world that they're in. So you hear morally gray a lot, and I don't even want to say it like that. I just want to say that they are trying to choose the best lives for themselves and for their found family based on what they have been given in life, because of all the sickness that had killed people. I think it killed most of the adults, and lots of parents left a lot of children orphaned. So the children were forced to go to other places within the world, and he finds himself under the tutelage, as it says, of a thief maker, and then finds himself somewhere else and joins the group with the other boys that he meets. And also there's a girl as well, but we don't get to hear very much about her in this book. And I am excited to see more of the story of what happens with a female and where is she at and all those sort of fun things. So it does build in some intrigue as well within the plot. The plot of this is very, very politically heavy, but not to the point of it being confusing or feeling drawn out. I really enjoyed the politics of this, and it didn't feel like I was really getting too lost. So for some background before this book, I wasn't very well read. I'm still not very well read, but I can say that I've read A Game of Thrones and I'm reading Malice, and this feels like a much easier read than those because you're following a lot less characters. So there's a lot less locations that you have to focus on. So although the political maneuvering isn't exactly simple, the complexity of it is not too confusing because you don't follow too many characters. And I love the way the training is talked about within this book, the way that the mentor trains the mentees and all the things that he trains them in within being a thief. It is so much more than, you know, your casual assassin story where, oh, they're learning all the war fighting, whatever. It's like, no, you have to learn how to be a type of person from a different area. You have to learn their language. You have to learn their gestures. You have to learn everything about them to try to fit in as if you were born there. And I feel like Locke does this so well. And a lot of people have cons to this book. And one of it is that one of the big cons is that they say, oh, well, Locke just gets out of everything, or, you know, just gets out of all his problems so easily and whatever. And I don't think so. I don't think there's a deus ex machina or whatever it's called, which is the main concern that a lot of people have. I would say that Locke, he was born with a gift for stealing, and it gets him into trouble, of course, but he also had a great mentor, and he definitely used what he was taught. And it was not just all self-taught or all self-learned. It was also the things that he had learned. You meet a wild group of characters, and I would say that they're all definitely their own person. They have their own voice, which I think is really great for fully fleshing out characters. I think that the plot is very interesting. It keeps you going. I kept wanting to turn the page in this, and you do have to be ready with the way that this is written. So let's go into the writing of this book. And the writing of this book is very different as well. So you go between the past and the present timelines. And the reason why I loved that so much is because I would go, okay, I'm reading in the present, blah, 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 cliffhanger, interlude or whatever, you're reading in the past, cliffhanger. And then you have to keep reading to keep getting your answers to these cliffhangers. And it keeps happening over and over and over again. And I read this book so fast because of that intrigue that the author was writing, and because I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening to these characters in the past? Because he's building on their relationships, and he's building on these interesting, intriguing plot lines from the past, because I know a lot of people don't care about the past, but he makes you really care about it, and I do typically care about the past as long as it's well written. And I would say that the writing in this book is really good. He curses a lot, but that's like a part of his prose, and I also think he's hilarious. I loved the jokes and everything going on in this book. I thought that it was pretty masterfully written in the way that Scott Lynch writes. Now, if you want something very beautiful and, you know, poetic, this is not, I don't know how to describe it, but I do love his prose. I thought it was very good. The way that he would describe people and the way that he would describe voices and everything going on in his world, I could picture it, and I could hear it, and I don't know, I just feel like I could see what was happening in this book so well, as if like when I recount it, it's like I'm watching a movie. And so the other thing I want to go into is the characters, and I liked the characters. It's very hard for me to get attached to characters in books and to feel that emotional empathy towards characters in books. And I feel like because this book was so crazy, I might have lost some of my empathy for what was going on in the story to the characters at whatever time it was, just because I was so interested in the furthering of the plot. So I don't know. I think that might just be a me thing. I have no idea, because I have read lots of books on my shelves, and I have only cried at the books that I have had connections to the characters previously, which would be The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. And I cried in the first Harry Potter because, now here's some Noelle lore, I cried in the first Harry Potter because Hagrid had given Harry a very special gift and made me cry. But I was already connected to those characters since I was a kid. And then same thing with The Lord of the Rings. At the end of The Lord of the Rings, not spoiling anything here, but at the end of The Lord of the Rings, I cried because it was such a beautiful ending. It just ended so perfectly. So this book, I would say that I would recommend to anyone who wants to get into fantasy. So if you're a beginner fantasy reader, I would recommend this. I don't think it's too difficult of a read, but it absolutely could be for some people. I just think because I was so interested that it wasn't too difficult for me to read, but I know that people's reading levels are very different. So I'm not gonna say, oh, you're not as smart or whatever if you don't understand this book, because I think to each his own. For when it comes to comprehending things in books, it's very difficult. I think it's all very, how do we even gauge it, you know? But anyway, so I would say in terms of complexity, the most complex thing is the politics. So if you're not as interested in politicking, I would still say give this a try, because of the way that it is written. It's not written like a history book, because I know some people say that about George R. R. Martin and his A Song of Ice and Fire books. I love the first book, and that's why I bought the rest of them. And a lot of people say it's kind of written like a history type book. This, when it comes to the politics, is not written like a history book. It is written like a fun crime novel movie. I would recommend this to people who like crime and thriller type books, because it can give you that, but with fantastical elements. If you like romance, there's absolutely like 1 milligram of romance in this. I would recommend this to someone who really likes fantasy and wants something different, because I feel like this is so different than anything I've ever read, and I have not read Joe Abercrombie's stuff yet. And I know a lot of people kind of talk about the grimdark and the kind of brutal type fantasy, but I think Joe Abercrombie's gonna be a lot more brutal than this. And there is some scenes of torture, and if you're a little queasy on it, it does go into detail a couple times about some pretty crazy things that happen. So if that's not for you, I would either say try to skip over it, or maybe don't pick up this book, because I know everybody has their limits, but I would say definitely try to figure out for yourself if this book is for you, and try to read it, because it was such a wonderful time. I love this cover for some reason. I've just been so drawn to it, and that's probably just because I read this book and I love it so much that the cover, even though it kind of looks like it should be on your grandfather's shelf, it's just become something great for me. And if you want to hear someone else talk about it, I hear that Murphy Napier, this is one of her favorite books as well. And she absolutely loves this book. I didn't necessarily read it because of her, but I did read it because I have heard so many people talk about it. And when I picked it up last year, I just fell in love with this book. And I really, really want to read the next book. And my TBR is just so long. But please let me know some of your favorite fantasy novels, whether they are similar to this one or completely different, something that you think I may like, or something you think I may not like, but still want my opinion on it. I don't know, let's just get crazy, you know? And let me know if you guys are a little bit more convinced, if you guys might pick up this book, and what other questions you might have for me, because I know this video may feel all over the place. I wanted to post a video about reading Malice, but I am still reading it. I'm about 69%, almost 70% through Malice, and I've been reading it for 3 months, but a lot has been happening in life since then. So I just, like I said, took this opportunity to talk about one of my favorite books, and yeah, just let me know. And if the mass market paperback is something you don't like, they do make this book in trade paperback. I know it's harder to find, and of course you can find it at your library online, probably not in person, but online, and read it on your Kindle or your phone on the Kindle app or something like that. Use Libby. Please read this book. If there's any questions you have or anything that I could try to convince you to read this book, I just want you to. And if you have things about it that you heard that you go, oh, maybe I don't want to read it because of this, let me know, and maybe I can try to ease your mind and still try to get you to read this book. But anyways, thank you guys so much for stopping by. Like and subscribe if you're nasty. And yeah, thank you so much, and y'all have a beautiful, wonderful day. God bless.